Testing, testing. It's all right. It doesn't work. Guys, thanks very much. I'm just going to give you a little bit of an introduction. But first of all, I'm going to explain the microphones. They don't really work to make you lot hear, but the little cameras, that's where the sound's going to go from there. So I just want to say thanks very much, firstly, for everybody sort of coming. It's really good to sort of see the numbers and everything sort of becoming a little bit more consistent, sort of seeing lots of new faces and friendly faces and everything else. But I wanted just to give a very little bit of an introduction again as to sort of who we are and what we're trying to sort of create, really. So it says it really in the sort of the name. So it's your social connection. And it really is that. It's yours. It's a social environment where you can all get together and build real connections. You just happen to be in a room full of people that are in business. Okay. Now, that's the real crux of what I want to do. I want to make it that sort of friendly, relaxed sort of social environment where, you know, you do your networking, you do your follow-ups, you do your one-to-one, and then you can sort of get back into this and you can sort of take it that little bit further and sort of build those real friendships. We've all got those plumbers, you know, my mate Fred, you know, if you've got a leaky tap, my mate Fred will be able to help you out. Everybody in this room could be a Fred, so to speak. So the crux of it for me was I was brand new to Cardiff about 2 years ago, and I'd never done networking, not in a true sort of sense. And most of the faces, probably a good sort of 80% of the faces in here are people that I call friends now, and I've made them through networking. Now, I know the people that I trust and I believe in, that I can make the recommendations to anybody that comes to me. And it's you lot in the room. And there's lots of other people that couldn't make it tonight. And that's what networking truly should be. It should be about building those relationships with people. You know, it shouldn't be necessarily about trying to go in there and sell to the room and everything else. So that's why we don't do the pitches and we don't do the business cards. We leave those to the professionals. Those are the guys that sort of organize and orchestrate those sort of things. And they do it amazingly well. We don't want to be that sort of networking group. But what we want to do is we want you guys to build those relationships so you can openly discuss your challenges. When we go to networking events, we're always on a highlight. We are putting ourselves under the spotlight. And what I mean by that is we're there going to promote our businesses. We're going to promote who we are and putting our best foot forwards. But if I can speak frank in the room, there's majority of you are business owners, business leaders, business development. And I'm sorry, but it's fucking lonely. It's fucking challenging. And between us all, we can share our sort of things and we can discuss those challenges openly with each other. By discussing the challenges, we can share our own experiences. It doesn't matter if you're on the first rung of the ladder or the top rung of the ladder. You can learn something from somebody that's in this room today. So please, after we've had this little sort of chat, if you stick around for a little bit longer afterwards, or if you do your follow-ups, please discuss with each other what you are finding your biggest challenge, what your biggest pain point is, because somebody will support you. Everybody in this room, I like to think, will sort of put an arm around the next person next to them and say, it's all right, it's okay. We can do this together. So I've rattled on enough. I'd like to take the sort of the great pleasure in introducing Rhys. Now, Rhys is going to come and share his story, and I hope you all find it really engaging and really sort of insightful. But Rhys, if you'd like to sort of come up and introduce yourself, mate.
Here I am, 29 years old, the world at my feet, 2 houses, a big car, a beautiful wife, 4 wonderful children. Just been offered a very large 6-figure contract to move to France to a beautiful club called Biarritz. One day on the 26th of January 2012, I'm in the gym doing an interval session on a bike, and in a heartbeat, my life changed forever. If anyone would like to maybe say what you see here? Can I ask? Anyone? Don't be shy. Intensive care? Anyone else? Life support? Yeah, definitely. What I see here, I see a boy. I see a boy in a man's body. I see a man that's disconnected from mind, body, and soul. I see an inauthentic man. A man that is not only sick in the body, but is sick in the mind. My name is Rhys Thomas, and I was born in Johannesburg, South Africa. And in the year 2000, I decided to move over to Wales to pursue a potential career in rugby. In the first 6 months that I was here, I had the honor of being invited to go to my first age grade World Cup in Chile in South America, where we would end up placing fourth at that year's World Cup. One of the men in this room was my coach that day. Lovely to see you, Di. And just a few years later, in 2006, just 10 years after I picked the rugby ball up for the very first time, I graced the pitches of international rugby with Wales on my very first tour to Argentina when I came off the bench in the second test in Buenos Aires. What an unbelievable experience. In the space of 10 years, from a little boy dreaming to do the one thing I ever wanted to do, to then achieve that in that time. I was so proud, honest to God. I felt like I was living the dream. Those next few years were just whatever I dreamt it to be, 100 times better, on and off the pitch. Now, I'd like to give you a kind of an idea of what it must be like to play on International Day. To leave the team hotel in the Vale, to drive in the bus, the team bus, with the police escorting you into town. As you come into Cardiff, turning into St. Mary Street, thousands of fans littering the streets as you part them with the bus. They screaming and shouting at you. Your blood's pumping, the nerves begin to rise. To then park under the stadium, go and get into your kit and go back onto the pitch. As you begin to feel that excitement build, the buzz of the crowd, the seats filling, that roar. Then go back to the changing room to change into the kit, to come back onto that pitch. As you walk down the tunnel, flames blasting, roof shut. As you look around, 75,000 people, passionate Welsh men and women, as they supporting you. To then sing this beautiful anthem, and then the whistle blows and boom, 80 minutes of war. What a buzz. Honest to God, there is not a feeling like it on this planet, I promise you. I've tried to find it many times after. The maddest thing is I can never remember a second about these games. Nothing. Not a single moment. Just noise and my breath, nothing else. There is, however, a hell of a lot I can remember about the night out afterwards. Now, it's one thing playing in front of 75,000 people in Cardiff. It's an entire different ball game, going out in town, dressed in your black tie, going out, red carpet treatment, VIP, everywhere you go, free drinks, people offering you drugs. You got women throwing themselves at you. All of a sudden, 5 years prior, I'm just this working class lad from Johannesburg. Now all of a sudden, I feel like I'm the king of Cardiff. You can only imagine the effect that this had on my ego. And slowly, unfortunately, bit by bit, that distraction, those bright lights, that little bit of fame and attention that the game brought me, I lost my way. I struggled to say no to that off-the-field experience. All my life, this was all I ever wanted to be. And in the space of 2 or 3 years, I had derailed it pretty much within no time at all. In 2009, when I started to get locked up for doing all sorts of stupid shit off the pitch, the Welsh management had seen enough and they released me from the squad. Now, I was devastated, honestly. My pride and ego was hurt big time. But instead of doubling down and sorting myself out, I kind of went the other way. I left the Dragons and moved to the Scarlets on what was at the time the biggest contract for a prop in Wales. But my first 2 years in the Scarlets was a disaster. I was injured almost for the entirety of the first 2 years because off the pitch, heavy drinking, drug taking, risk taking of every description. Then finally in my last year at the Scarlets, I thought, what am I doing? I'm a 29-year-old man. Why don't I just go and sort myself out? Go back to doing what I do best, at least secure another couple of contracts and pay off the family home for me and the kids for when I finish the game. And that's what I did. Ironically, in 2012, I probably played the best rugby of my life. I pre-contractually agreed to move over to France, like I said, to Biarritz on a very large six-figure contract. Then one day, on the 26th of January in 2012, I had that heart attack. Now, I was very lucky to survive. I'd had a quadruple bypass, and when I woke up, not only now was I very ill, it would literally take me 10 meters. I would stop 2 or 3 times over 10 meters. But I was also lost the thing that mattered the most in my life at that point, and that was my rugby career. Honestly, I was devastated. I did not know how to deal with it. My wife used to beg me, Rhys, please speak to me. Speak to a doctor, a psychologist, a friend, someone. But I didn't. I just locked it in like most men and just hoped that it would go away. And it didn't, unfortunately. And over those next few weeks and months, what was a physical battle became a huge mental battle. All those thoughts in my head, all the shame, remorse, guilt that I had from the past, but also I could not see a positive future. And all of a sudden I found myself locked in the mind with this incessant negative thought pattern, and I didn't know how to deal with it. But as my mental health deteriorated, so did my physical health. And in 2013, I got given roughly about 12 months to live. My only other option was to have a machine implanted into my heart that could keep me alive long enough that I could hopefully have a transplant in the future. Now, I had this operation in 2014. The pump was called the left ventricular assist device. It's a machine that is implanted into the left side of my heart that sucks the blood out of my heart and pumps it back through a tube that is connected to my aorta. That is run externally by a set of batteries. These batteries last 8 hours a set. If I don't plug myself in after those 8 hours to a new set of batteries, my heart can stop and I can die. You can imagine when I woke up from this operation, having to come round to the fact that now my life is run by a machine. They can't tell me how long it's going to last. If I don't change my batteries after 8 hours, I can die. In 2 years before that, I was playing international rugby. How was a little boy from Joburg supposed to have the tools to deal with this kind of thing? Now, for those of you that think that I'm wearing this man bag as a fashion statement tonight, this is the bag that houses the batteries that keeps me alive. Again, I was very fortunate to survive this operation. I was in coma for 2 weeks post-op. But when I did wake up and go out into the world, that next couple of months and year was an incredible challenge for me. One I was very unprepared for. Over those next few months and years, my mental health deteriorated rapidly, and I didn't know how to deal with it. Panic attacks, anxiety, things I didn't even know what those words meant. And the only way I knew how to deal with those things was to do the one thing that had helped me all the time through my life. And that one thing was alcohol. And unfortunately for me, between the year 2016 and 2019, I became an alcoholic. With this machine, on the heart transplant waiting list, it wasn't enough. I wasn't your typical brown paper bag type of alcoholic, more like your Friday, Saturday, Sunday drinker. But when I drank, I would drink until I blacked out. I would wake up in hospital beds, police cells, nightclubs, taxis, the street. And sometimes my friends would find me. They couldn't wake me up. I was comatose. My batteries would be beeping, and they would have to ring my wife, Paula, 3, 4 in the morning and say, Paula, what do? We found Rhys. We can't wake him up. then she would have to wake up at that time of the morning, know that I potentially had 15 minutes until I was going to potentially die, and explain to them how to swap my battery so that I didn't. You can only imagine the stress this caused my family. Fortunately for me, and I say fortunately, on the 1st of September in 2019, I had a car crash drunk. Luckily, no one else was injured, nor myself. But the events that followed that evening were enough for me to know that I had a very big problem and that things were going to need to change. Now, I wasn't quite sure how bad my problem was. But about 5 months later, whilst on a family holiday, I had my best friends, with the help of my ex-wife and my father, staged an intervention. They staged an intervention and sent me to a rehab facility in Cape Town. Now, I can promise you now, I did not want to go. I argued with them at length, telling them that I was okay, but I was in a huge amount of denial. But the minute I walked through those doors of rehab, I knew instantly that I was in the right place. I learned more about myself in that next 28 days than I did in 37 years as a man. It was genuinely one of the most profound, painful, but transformational days of my life. Some of the fundamental things that I had to challenge myself over in that house was about my ego and pride. And that was something that I had to surrender for me to begin to my healing process. My pride and ego, two things that had helped me so much in my life to that point, through my career, through my adult life, but then in my worst hours became my biggest enemy. Surrendering my pride and ego was the first stage for me being able to heal. As well as that, from being vulnerable and honest for probably the first time in my adult life, surrounded by complete strangers, addicts of every description, it allowed me to start to pull back some of those masks, to start to ask the right questions. And one of those questions was, how badly has fear impacted my life? And I looked deep within, and I can tell you now, fear basically dictated my life from a young man. From the fear of rejection and confrontation, to then through my career, the fear of judgment and the fear of failure, to then after my heart attacks, the fear of death and the fear of the unknown. As well as that, it led me to a very important question, probably the greatest question I ever asked myself. And I'm going to ask you now, if you were to write this down on a piece of paper, who am I? Some of you may not know, and that's okay. But say I were to take your job, your house, your car, your family, and ask yourself that question again. Who am I? I doubt very many of us in this room would potentially know that question. Deep down. But this question was the beginning of a new start for me in my life. Because two things happened to me when I lost my career. One thing was I lost my identity, and the other one was I lost my purpose. And when I lost those two things, my life went one way, fast. And in that, I lost everything. But it was the greatest lesson I ever learned. And during that process, it allowed me to repurpose, to find my why, to understand what those two things even meant, but to go out into the world and begin to implement that. And that's what I began to do. The minute I left rehab, I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to share with others my experiences to make them understand that every day is precious. This is not a rehearsal. This is not a rehearsal. Make the most of every second with your loved ones, forgiving people. Why do we not tell others how we feel, how much we love them? Why do we hold on to grudges? It's just baggage. But through this experience, my life changed immensely. And I'm going to leave you with a little quote from my hero, who I had the absolute pleasure in meeting with one of our tours with Wales, is that I learned that courage was not the absence of fear, but the triumph over it. The brave man is not he who does not feel afraid, but he who conquers that fear. It always seems impossible until it's done. I've allowed fear to dictate my life in the past. I will never allow that to happen again. Now, that doesn't mean I don't have fear, but now I have to accept it and live with it every day. Thank you very much. Yeah, sure.